And I think sometimes for some of these properties like Star Wars, there's so much risk in mishandling it that even Disney, I think, and let's not spend a bunch of time on this, but even Disney is sort of like recalibrating their approach to it. Now they aren't going to, sort of like cave to the whims of a very vocal minority or even part of a fan base that I do think is toxic. But there are a lot of people in the fan base that are going, we don't think you understand how much weight and mass Star Wars has, and it's something that you have to be really careful with, that you're not just sort of making Star Wars stories, especially with legacy characters, just sort of on a whim. There's a real care that has to go into that, and they're in a hard spot with that property, because I think a sort of a sister property in a sense that's so coveted is the Back to the Future trilogy. And Bob Zemeckis, Bob Gale, even Spielberg are all like, as long as we are alive, this movie will never get sequels. It will never get a reboot. It'll never get remade, nothing. Now, they do have a musical on Broadway. I don't know if it's still running right now, but they did have a musical that came of it, which is a little bit of a different story. But I am glad with that property. I don't want there to be a new version of Back to the Future. I don't want there to be a sequel.
But
I don't want 60 years from now for somebody to make
the
a
original
new version.
though? Like, because I feel like that's almost more of a cultural like mirage. That like, if it was open source and anybody could do whatever with it, like it's not reductive to the original. The original still exists in its full capacity. And I think maybe that's a lesson we need to learn as a culture, of separating, like, the first Star Wars film is always its own asset. Like, it's always,
Absolutely.
it can be viewed. I can put it on right now and watch it. And I shouldn't be judging that through the lens of, well, there's this, and this. And I get it. You're protecting properties. There's like larger systems at play. But I think the way to view art is like, I'm not going in and like, oh man, there was a terrible, I listened to, I don't know, pick anything.
Your argument is completely sound, and I completely agree with you. I want other artists, filmmakers, storytellers to be able to take those worlds and explore them in new ways. Here's where it gets a little problematic in my experience with some of these properties, especially when the studios who own the intellectual rights and all that stuff, there's something different when, and this kind of relates to Star Wars, and this would apply to Back to the Future and other franchises, there's something different when it's like canon.
Yeah.
Versus someone playing in that playground and making something that doesn't have the stakes of it being like canon. Now, we might be assigning meaning to something as being canon. Like, you guys just settle down.
Settle down.
Jesus. But there's something that hurts when Luke Skywalker is handled the way he was in that movie for me.
Yeah.
Knowing that that's it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be another way, because, obviously they can have fan films and, all that stuff, and that's wonderful. But there's such an officialness to it that is hard for maybe people on the outside looking in to understand. But it's just like,
I'm probably speaking like blasphemy to a lot of fans, but like, is part of that just like, maybe that's the actor's responsibility to just be like, I'm not going to be involved in this.
Yeah, I wish he would have, because he tried like hell to tell to push back from what I understand.
I think Godfather is an interesting example, right? Like you have the first two films, and then you have the third where they couldn't get the get the right cast. They couldn't, but now people like. Some people really like the third. I think the third is fine. Yeah. But does that movie not, does that not living up to 1 and 2 take away from 1 and 2's absolute, greatness? No, not at all. In my opinion. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know. you said settle down and like a minor lease. And that's kind of how
No,
I feel. I'm
100%.
just like, settle down.
I
Like,
get it. It's irrational.
because these are properties,
to it.
and we're viewing it through the lens of our lifespan right now too.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're seeing this happen right now, where patents are expiring. IP is being passed into the public domain from pieces that, like, I mean, within the reasonable range of just like us doing this podcast, reasonable range, like. There's going to be some significant IP that passes in.
Absolutely.
There's going to be some significant patents that expire and IP that passes into public domain. You already seen it with Great Gatsby. I think recently passed into public domain. There was Mickey Mouse, and they made the slasher film.
The Steamboat
Winnie the
Willie
Pooh. I mean, it's like, put it out there. Like, let people use these properties, because... Yeah, I don't know. I think,
and I don't disagree with that at all.
But part of me is also like, but come on, let's just develop some new properties.
It had been a golden afternoon, and I remember having the familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer and summer.